Well, let us begin.
All right.
Thank you all you people who are out there in the internet world for joining us. So, today, as the title might suggest, we're going to talk about the elegance of species design. Now, it might seem odd after doing 3 straight weeks of Schumann to do another piece by Schumann, but that is how the calendar falls. And I'm not, as they say, I'm not mad at it. Not mad at it. So, probably everybody listening has done some work in species counterpoint. So we'll have some kind of, almost all of us maybe, have done some work in this. And so we might feel like, you know, we've got a pretty good grasp of that, what that means. But I want to make sure we really define the term species. What are we actually talking about? What would be a good kind of analogy for species? And when we do it in counterpoint in the Fuchsian way, we set up patterns of rhythm and we study how lines themselves interact with each other and with themselves. So in essence, you're taking one of the variables out of music. You're saying that rhythmically, every single line has to confine to this exact rule, this meter, right? So in essence, what you're kind of doing is setting down like a lattice work for which you can then fill. Now, to be honest, species design kind of reaches its height in the late Romantic period. And then by the time you get to Debussy and early modernism, it starts to break down. When you look at, so I guess what I'm saying about species is, before I move on to the historical part of this, is that by taking a certain set of variables out of the equation, i.e. your actual rhythmic content, and making it uniform, measure to measure or phrase to phrase, you can then inject your harmony, your contrapuntal design on top of that and have a basis for comparison, right? The trick to writing a very good species is to understand that the actual species design elements in them cannot occupy either the foreground or the background entirely. A good species should be interesting enough to listen to on its own, but also not so complex that you can't run a melody on top of it or below it, in essence. Does that make sense? So you can actually have a species design type of piece with a free-flowing melody on top or below, or in another voice, right? When you write a violin sonata, when you write an art song, what are you doing with the piano? 75 to 85% of the time. You're writing accompaniment. And what is the accompaniment structure? It's usually a species design. If your species is not constant, if your species changes from moment to moment, it becomes very difficult for us to actually follow the logic of your piece, right? I always believe that we live in the, I guess we used to have remote controls, now we just have YouTube, and like you see that the YouTube video is like 5 minutes, you're like, oh my god, 5 minutes, like that's way too long. So you watch like the first 30 seconds, and you click on like, well, you might like this, and you go to the next one. That's like changing your species all the time, right? And, you know, the modernists began this by juxtaposing species side by side. When you hear Stravinsky, for example, early Stravinsky, he will write a phenomenal species. You'll have this going on. Everybody remembers that. But then what everybody always forgets is after that's finished, you get the... So what that is a juxtaposition of 2 separate species from back to back. And that's what modernism, the actual definition of modernism is, right? The juxtaposition of 2 objects which don't relate to one another, so that you can see each in each other's light. So, you know, Debussy also, the absolute master of changing species. Whenever I see somebody that tries to write like this, I think, wow, I hope you have half the amount of talent as Debussy, because it's one of the hardest things in the universe to do, is do what he did. Which is, from moment to moment, your species can be totally different. You just have it for little fragments of time, and then a whole other one, and then a whole other one. And yet every one of those is like a home run. Everyone goes, damn. If I just thought of that one, I'd write a whole piece like that. Right? That's the beauty of Debussy. It's that every piece seems like it could have been 50 pieces if all the strings were fully pulled out. And yet the juxtaposition of each one makes perfect fluidic sense. So, you know, I look, as you probably know, most of you, at a lot of new music on a very regular basis, on an everyday basis, and I've told all of you who have ever studied with me to mind your species content, right? Because if you create a successful enough species, it should provide enough middle ground interest to carry all of your harmonic and contrapuntal ideas from start to finish. And what it does is provide like a regularity for which then you can depart or you can go with. Does that make sense? And sometimes without having some regular default, which is what a species really is, you feel like there's too many variables, you can't process what's important and what's not important. So I thought to show this first, we look at the Schumann Intermezzo from Faschingsschwank Wien. This is a piece, if you just take a quick glance through it, has a single species from start to finish. It's not a long piece, it's only about 1.5 minutes, perhaps. But it has an incredibly elegant species design, which allows, it's rather simple, well, I shouldn't say simple, but rather, you know, not too complex melodic and bass counterpoint to be heard pretty elegantly. One more thing before I play this. Think about all the preludes of Bach that you know, right? And think about what their harmonic content is at the beginning. What do we usually get? If you're going to do your Roman numerals, you get 1, 5, or 7, and then 1, and then 5 or 7, and then 1. And then you take off in the sequence and you start going somewhere else, right? Why is it that the harmonic content can be so predictable and we're okay with it? It's because the species are so interesting, every single one, right? The harmony in Bach is not, you know, especially in expository passages, is not what's getting you out of bed in the morning. You're like, wow, I gotta go listen to that. It's that the species themselves are so interesting and complex and make what would otherwise be simple things, like the harmonic content, be not as important as you might think. So they have a relationship, right? Obviously, you can't have a species without having harmony, or vice versa. But nonetheless, I hope that makes a little bit of sense. It's a complicated topic to talk about, you know, because species requires control of counterpoint, harmony, and rhythm, all 3 elements. And that's why it's really hard for a lot of people to come up with species that they think are cool enough or interesting enough to carry them through an entire piece. All right, so let me play the Schumann for you real quick, and then we'll discuss the construction.
Do you need to turn your page?
Oh yeah, could you do that? That'd be very sweet. Thank you. Professional page turner. There we go. Thank you very much.
Am I the only one who hears the DA0, right?
Oh, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. Now, again, let's analyze what's actually happening in this species structure, shall we? This is one of these rare Schumann pieces, which, despite how I just played it, actually is really easy and sounds really hard. That's not Schumann's way. It's usually incredibly hard and meant to sound like nothing is happening. But how is he pulling this off? Now, there's a couple of things in place here. The arpeggio off the beat is one thing. But notice, every weak beat, you have this tiny little half step below the arpeggio. This is, as everybody here probably already knows, the contrapuntal motive, and it's rhythmically in its place every single moment, and they're consistently throughout the piece. So that leaves, and since you have to cross over with your left hand to grab each one of those, that leaves the arpeggio actually very easy to play because you never have to move your hand. It's just always in the hand, which is very nice. It makes it a lot easier to play than otherwise. And offsets gives you a slight agogic accent on that secondary beat. Now, of course, you know Schumann, the master of first species counterpoint between the soprano and bass. And that's exactly what you get here. The bass is consistently in species as well, always moving on 1 and 3, right? And thus the harmony is always changing on 1 and 3. But the melodic design is free above it. Now, it's one of the things that's commonly said in composition training that you can teach anybody, you can teach everything to anybody except how to write a melody. And I've always thought that to be not true, right? You can teach people to write melodies using contrapuntal motive. You can teach them using contrapuntal voices and how to construct single line counterpoint that's always interesting and memorable. We talked about that in other lectures. But here I just want to point out how interesting this melody is from actually a point of view that I don't usually talk about, which is the kind of rhetorical point of view. Think about the actual melody itself, just with the bass. That's a melody right there. A vocal melody, really. Right? It almost looks like it has text to it, because there's no predictability to it in essence, right? As the species is so incredibly predictable here, yet the melodic design is so free. And think about it from a rhetorical point of view. The first thing he does is make a statement. Big sforzando. And then immediately, a reaction. As if to say, hey! Oh, wait, no, I didn't mean to totally upset you. And then, here's what I actually wanted to say. Notice the augmentation of the contrapuntal motive there. And then something new in repeated pitches. Another sforzando. And then finishes before the phrase. So elegant, isn't it? Right? And I want to stress that it can only be so free because the rest of the species is so regular. That's the key to understanding species design, right? Oftentimes, I think people these days, they might write something like this in species, like, oh, it's kind of boring, it's just the same thing all the time. Like, okay, no, right? I mean, always remember the quote that Boulanger said, that you should never be afraid to be obvious, right? I mean, that's number one evidence there. But also, you have to remember that our brain does not hear music like we're looking at it on the page in 2 dimensions. We hear it in 3 dimensions. We categorize what's important, what's least important, what's the least important. Right? And in our brains, the melodic line of soprano is always the most important. What's second? Bass. What's third? The alto and the tenor. And notice how this species is constructed. The wonderful soprano line, the active bass, almost always stepwise, and the species design in the center. Elegant. Very nice. Now, just from a contrapuntal point of view, I'm going to talk about this, I think, 2 lectures from now when we talk about hypermetrics. But you know how much of a stickler I am for contrapuntal regularity. Notice at the end of the phrase, we get to that B flat minor chord. What do we do? Well, several things. Is that a minor 5 chord going to 1? Well, that would already be atypical and strange on its own. But furthermore, isn't contrapuntally that parallel fifths and octaves? Play them as chords. There's no contrapuntal connection there, right? And there could have been. Think about on beat 4, you could have changed that arpeggio to do something like this. So you would have had, instead of the straight octaves. Why does he do that? I mean, Schumann falls into that category with Chopin and Bach and others. They don't write parallel fifths. So, isn't that parallel fifths? Sure looks like it.
I guess since you just said they don't do it, I guess.
I guess it's kind of a rhetorical trick question, isn't it? Well, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to actually spend a whole lecture on this in, I think, a month from now. But this is a hypermetric reset, right? When you start the 5th bar, your brain automatically knows that you're back at the beginning, right? What do we remember most when somebody's talking to you? When you listen to this lecture right now, what are you going to remember most? Probably what I said at the beginning and the last thing I said. Everything else you're going to be like, I don't know, yeah, I remember some of that stuff. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was boring, I don't know. But anyway, the beginning and the end, right? And you have to remember that our brains do not connect linearly in time as you think they do, right? Whatever we think is most important, we go, oh yeah, that's cool. And then it's going on. And then we hear that again, and we're like, oh yeah, that's the beginning. Yeah, all right, cool. And so there doesn't have to be a contrapuntal or harmonic connection between what we call hypermetric downbeats. Right? Because really what it is a reset. It's just like you're starting fresh. You're starting. There doesn't need to be a smooth and elegant connection in the counterpoint or the harmony. And I would argue that there is neither of those things. We're on a minor 5 chord. Does minor 5 go to minor 1 in this era of time? No, it doesn't. Right? And we just made a full cadence in the dominant minor, right? We're solidly in B flat minor. And there was like, nope, we're back at the beginning. And our brains didn't even think about it. We're like, that's cool. Yeah, no problems. We're good. I take it. Hypermetricity is something we're talking about a lot next time. So I'll leave that for later. Interesting topic to talk about, isn't it? Second time around. Change right here. And we have the half cadence in the dominant, as you'd expect. Completing a standard antecedent consequent double period phrase. Right? We all know what those terms are, right?
I mean, I don't matter.
That's not true. Well, a period, of course, is just an entire phrase, right? 4-bar period. And we have a double period where it starts the same way both times, but the ending is different, right? And so it's A, B, A, C type of situation. And that's very standard because you don't want to be on the tonic when we start phrase 3, because then we're kind of just being boring. So we use the difference in this, the non-standard part, is that the first phrase did modulate, and then he just ignored it and started over. The second phrase also modulates, but now to the dominant, not to the dominant minor. Okay, then he begins the smaller phrases. And again, when you look at phrase structure and hypermetricity, this stuff fascinates me. I literally could talk about hypermetricity until I blew in the face. We had 4-bar phrases. What does he do now? He halves, he diminishes the length of the phrases. Right? Those are half the length of the other phrase. Right? 2-bar phrases each that just start A, B, A, C. And what does that do? It increases the tension a great deal. Because all of a sudden the hypermetric rhythm has doubled or halved. Whichever way. It's getting faster. Right? And then the big build. A couple of things there. Landing on the 9th, leaping away to the 5th, a very Bacchian technique there. Very beautiful, right? This is the height of the phrase, as evidenced by all the contrapuntal rules that we normally talk about. You want 1 apex in every phrase. Well, there it is, a high C, right? Lovely pitch. Outside the key, right? Our apex being outside the key is a bonus gold star special point, right? The high C natural. And think about how boring this would have been to do. Right? Again, a lesser composer would have done it. Remember what we did in bar 3? We've had this many times. So why not? That'd be a very literal rendition of what we had done before. And you would think, I mean, if I played that, you'd be like, that's fine, that's good, that's okay, it's wonderful. Right? But what he has is better. And how does he decide to leap that 5th down and leave the dissonance hanging? Again, it's because of the species design, right? If I play it without the melody from that bar before, that's the species that we've come to expect inside that sequence, right? And if the A flat were to be there instead of the E flat, this is the second 8th note of that bar, you would have broken the species. Because you would have had 2 pitches at the same time. You'd have a dyad there and a Gajic accent, which wouldn't have made sense in the context. Let me play it with that. This making sense? This is a little complex. Let me try this again. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, this will make sense when I play it this way. right? I mean, that sounds way out of context. So either you break the species, which would really like throw this whole thing into a little chaos loop, or you change the melody. And the beautiful thing is here, he decided to change the melody, and it made it better. Why? Because the melody has been the free aspect of this. It's what's sitting on top of the species, saying, hey, I can do whatever I want. Right? I just can't interfere or break the species. And thus, you get a leap away from a ninth. You know, always that fifth leap from a ninth to a fifth of a chord is always just one of the great things. I love music math, right? It's like 9 minus 5 equals 5, right? We're leaping a fifth down from the ninth and we're on the fifth. Think about that for a second.
I can't.
I know.
I don't want to.
Sometimes when I teach when I used to teach like theory 1, you can really confuse people by being like, if you don't know what one interval plus another one is, just add the numbers and subtract 1.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I.
That's the way to do it, right? And they're like, well, why? And I'm like, think about this. If you were always bad at math when you were a kid, this should be great for you because they're always wrong. They're always just one number less than you think they are. 5 plus 5 equals 9. All right, so 9 minus 5 equals 5.
No.
Stop. 2 plus 2 is 5, and war is peace.
That's right. There you go. See, it all makes perfect sense. All right, so we come out of the sequence. Now, these little 2 bars right here, I think are something that only Schumann could have written. I think this is the most innovative part of the piece here. Let's go carefully. It looks like we're going to have a dominant pedal, right? When you see a pedal like this at the end of the phrase, you've got crescendos, we're going to go back to tonic, you think dominant pedal time, right? But your memory might tell you that Mi is the tonic. So Mi flat is the tonic pedal, going to tonic? That doesn't make sense. Let's see what's actually happening. That is a hell of a cadence right there. Let's start with how he gets to it. So when you land on that downbeat, let's think about the function of the pedal. The Mi flat right now is the 7th of a dominant 7th chord, right? And this would be the 7th chord of the dominant minor, B flat minor, right? And this would go, and you would be in B flat. That's the key that we were actually in. Okay, so that's not a surprise. But then he changes to this. Okay, now I got something, right? This guy sounds like what? Now we're going to be in A flat minor, which should be modulated to the subdominant. Okay, so you're still in the wrong place. But then he goes, okay, this is looking better. Maybe A flat minor is really going to happen, right? Because from this chord I go directly to it. But the last one is the special one. These have all been fully diminished, right? But the very last one is not fully diminished, it's dominant. And that chord is highly irregular. The C natural is outside the key, right? Do you remember, all those of you who have been with us from time immemorial, remember I think I did a lecture in the spring, where I talked about modality and how we borrow pitches from each mode to make different sonorities. More on that in the Faure coming up, by the way. If you think about it, what is the pitch here that's borrowed from another mode? It's the Do natural, right? We should be in Mi flat minor. So in a minor mode, the Do natural is a raised 6th of the key. Okay, so what mode includes a minor 3rd and a raised 6th? Dorian. Yep. So this is a Dorian 4 chord with a 7th, which makes it a dominant 7th. A non-functional dominant 7th plagal cadence. That's a sound that you really don't get until more non-classical types of music start springing up in the 20th century, right? This is not a sound that belongs to the classical world of harmony. It almost doesn't even belong to the French extended modal world of harmony. It's way out there.
I was going to say, it sounds closer to that.
I agree. It's a forerunner. You have to think the Faure must have played this with like, oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. How could we make this standard? We could take it to a Do flat and make it a minor chord. Then we have a more standard plagal cadence. Still with the 7th, it's a pretty one. But the reason why that's not so optimal is on the 4-7 minor, these 2 common tones, it's like you're almost already there. However, when I put the Do natural in, I all of a sudden the tendency of those pitches is totally different.
Yeah.
Now the soul flat wants to go down to fa, right? But he forces them down. Notice the markings. Remember, Schumann's marking is always give it away. He doesn't have one crescendo. He has two crescendos that are exactly in the same place, above and below the staff. That's weird.
Wow.
So
Right?
really throw us off, like, as far as expectations.
Exactly, right? And to make sure, like, don't play this pretty. He's got staccato accents on the last three, and he has a ritardando. I mean, like, that is all the signs of being like, don't be pretty here. Slam this home, right? To go. I mean, look, the tempo marking at the beginning is mit größter energy, right? With as much energy as possible, right? I mean, größter. I mean, I imagine größter.
Yeah.
So you know, I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise that continues this entire piece.
You see how Mahler might have learned something too, just marking everything.
Yeah, you're right about that. There's not a there's no room here for anything else. Everything is marked, right? But I mean, I just want to point out how incredibly rare and bizarre that is. You know, it's really a special moment. Now, I'm going to skip a little bit here because the second part of the piece is exactly the same as the first, except we just don't modulate out of the first phrase. We stay in the home key, and thus everything that was in the dominant in the B section gets back into the tonic here. So fast forward with me all the way to the bottom of the page, probably, where you see the same passage we just looked at, now with an A flat pedal. Same exact passage, transposed, and now we're in A flat minor. The most minor you can get, right? All 7 flats in the key. Love it. Yeah. A flat minor, I should do a whole lecture on A flat minor.
Yeah.
And it's so bizarre. And, you know, we see A flat minor much more often than we ever see G sharp minor. And A flat minor has 7 flats and G sharp minor has 5 sharps. It's so weird.
There's something about it.
Yeah.
It's very forbidding.
It really is. Yeah. I think it's the end of the circle of flats, right?
Yeah.
There's really no reason you should ever have 8 flats in a key section.
Right.
No reason. You've gone too far. You've written it wrong. No, there really is. I mean, that would be F flat major, right? Otherwise known as E major.
Right.
Like, there's no way you should write something in F flat major. You're doing it wrong, right? You can enharmonically modulate and make us feel like we're in F flat, but you should still change it over to sharps at that point.
Right.
So A flat is like the final frontier. It's like as flat as the keyboard can go, or as flat as music can go. That's why I think it has that bizarre feel, like it's the ultima, you know.
This should change the beginning of Star Trek then. A flat minor, the final frontier.
I like it. Yeah, A flat minor, the ultima thule.
Yeah.
Mythology. All right. So anyway, we're in A flat minor, and we run the whole thing again. That leads us to the coda, and I want to take a look at the coda for a second. I think it's very special. This is 7 bars before the end, 8 bars before the end. When we get back into E flat minor with the Piccolo third. Here's the cadence. Interesting the tenor and bass writing is here. Did anybody notice? That's the opening melody down there in the tenor. That is incredibly beautiful. And cannoned, if that's a verb, with the soprano. So I'm going to play everything except the arpeggios here, okay? Except the species. So that's the canon between the tenor and the soprano. And now, because he's not done yet, he's going to do it between the bass and the tenor. Okay, so here's the second phrase, just everything except the species. That's amazing. So look at the sonority you end up with on that downbeat. This is 5 before the end. You get. That's a heck of a sonority for Schumann, right? Again, spacing and doubling is everything in harmony, right?
Which chord is that?
This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before the end where the sforzando is.
Yeah.
So you get the B flat in the bass.
Oh yeah.
Again, the species design shows you that this is possible. He's decided to invert the soprano and tenor and make it bass and tenor, right? And so by putting the dissonance in the bass, basically the equivalent of a 9/8 suspension in the bass, that's an incredibly dissonant moment. Here's the bar before it. Even right here. I mean, it's funny because when you, I love to say this is my favorite guilty pleasure is to play through the well temperate and just replay all the suspensions. Just don't tie them, just replay them because it's just everything is dissonant at all moments, and it just sounds like $1 million. It ends up sounding like Faure. And here's a moment like that too. You're holding over the Do flat, but you're going playing the C flat. Oof. And if you replayed it, right? If you actually played it. It's not again. So that was like a series of little mini cannons, right? That's how you make a lot out of nothing right there.
Yeah.
You know, that's a tonic chord. Nothing else is happening. Your arpeggio is going the whole time. Last thing I'll point out about this. When he gets into the coda, you'll probably notice that one very memorable thing is gone, which is the contrapuntal mode. Very interestingly enough, as soon as you get just that pickety third, which is like 9 before the end, all of a sudden we don't have the, which we've had the entire piece up until that point. He drops it so that he can make these canons happen. Interesting, isn't it? Nice decision. And you know, because this is the other lesson about species, like how to control. Okay, let me put it this way. You've got the species working and you love it, you've done it the whole piece. So then you got like 10 bars before the end, you're like, well, I gotta keep it going, I'm almost at the end, I gotta keep it going. But knowing the wisdom to be like, that's enough actually. Like, I don't need the contrapuntal mode here every measure. Why? Because the piece is over. I'm in the coda. Once you're in the coda, the piece is over. Bring us home.
Yeah.
Finish it off, buddy. You know, as my dear friend Dr. Hardaway says, land the plane. Get out while you still can. Yeah.
Just sell it.
That's right. That's right. All right. Any thoughts or questions on any of that?
It's in that with that 9/8 suspension.
Yeah.
There, it's almost like he knew the impact of that. I mean, he's got the sforzano like he has the measure, but it's like really.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That one you can just tell he was really happy when he wrote that.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, that's my moment.
Yeah.
It's the final dissonance you hear before the end of the piece. Everything else is constant from that point on. All right, so you know, you always want your I say this a lot. You always want your penultimate chord to be your best chord. You know, your final chord should be good too. I'm not saying it's good, but your penultimate chord should be the one that you are like, oh yeah. That's nice.
So it earns that final.
Yeah, I mean, think about in the Renaissance, how many pieces end with right, the classic plagal ending of the Renaissance, right? Why is it so great? Because the moment before the release of the tension, we have the most dissonant thing. That can't be right. That can't be right. Oh, that's right. You always save your best chord for the final.
Or the very end of the St. Matthew Passion.
Oh,
Everyone just rests on that.
Just rest on the. Oh, it's so good.
Or Sibelius 7.
Ah, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. Just I know I don't talk about my own music on these things, but I will just give you one example. Final chord of my violin sonata, penultimate chord is this. And the final chord is. So that's an order. And that, you know, that's as dissonant as you're going to get. That's it. Anyway. All right, let's do the Faure, shall we? And for this, we have a very special guest.
Oh,
Yeah.
do you have a copy?
What's that?
Do you have a copy?
I do.
Okay.
So, we have awesome soprano, Rebecca here.
Hi.
Rebecca Myers. Say hi to all the people. You won't see yourself because it's like on the super delay. But yeah, you won't say.
Okay.
So we're going to do the Clair de Lune. We're doing it in Do minor. Here in the soprano key. And just before we play it, as we play through the whole thing, consider what about the species design is making it so special. Right? I don't think it'll be too hard for you to figure out. All right, here we go. Lovely. Hey, wow. Thank you. That was lovely.
Do you need me to do the other things?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
It's always nice to actually hear the actual song. Us composers and dorks like us, we sit here playing through the piano part and singing the thing in our head or singing it out loud like idiots and probably singing flat all the time and not singing the right words. There's no substitute for the real thing. So let's talk about the species design, shall we? I think it should be pretty apparent what the trick is, right? The 16th note offset the entire time is so incredibly powerful. Faure is, a direct descendant of Schumann, in my opinion. He really is. Right? There's no Faure without Schumann. And both of them have incredible metric control. Both of them, their hypermeter and then their standard meter. And they do it through species design. I want to show you how incredibly boring this would be if I took out that 16th rest and I pushed everything back to the left. 1/16. This is it. Ooh, is that tough, right? Now the harmony is great. That didn't change. But what changed? It's unlistenable. It's so heavy.
It's very amateur.
Yeah, it does sound pretty amateur, actually. You know, it sounds almost like, you know, dare I say, poppy, right? You know, I mean, it's really, there's no rhythmic interest there, right? And just that tiny little offset of the bass always trying to catch up with soprano. So that's one element of it. The other is the bass writing itself. Now we know this is an incredible melody. We could break that down and talk about that at great length. How the repetition in the melody is in a different metric place, right? The fact that this is on beat 3 and this is on beat 2 provides a slight hemiola, right, which is very powerful. So that, I mean, that's why that melody is so memorable. But here's the other thing. When you look at the bass line of a Bach chorale, what do you see 95% of the phrases in any Bach chorale? The bass moves stepwise, 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 2, 5, 1. Stepwise, 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 2, 5, 1. Right? That's how he rolls. And why? Because he knows that that's going to give you a more full sound. It's going to make the bass feel melodic, which is to say, give it a little bit more of a character. Right? I notice the bass here. If I play the first species, only at the very end do we do the 5, 5, 1, or 2, 5 if you think we're in the new key. I'll talk about harmony in a second. Same thing in the next phrase. That plagal cadence mid-phrase is the killer, isn't it? And again, that gives us the hemiola effect. Right? All right, 1, 2, 3. That, this time, goes along with the... And so, in essence, the bass kind of copies what the soprano had done the first time. Lovely, isn't it? There's so much detail in this. That's why I love Faure so much. I mean, every note counts. Now, I was talking about hypermetrics before, right? Here's another interesting little hypermetric moment. Look at the end of the first phrase. And now the next one. Did we really just do? Sure sounds like gross fifths and octaves. If you know how much I love contrapuntal voices. You could say, well, the sol is really going to fa, and the do is going 5-1 to fa, and the mi is hanging through the next phrase. Technically, that is true. Although that would make that chord a minor major 7th chord, which, by the way, you know, would be even cooler than it actually is. It would really be. That's in play, but I think it's a little less in play than normal. Why? Because again, there's a hypermetric reset here, a hypermetric downbeat. That when you hear measure 3, somehow your brain just knows you're at the beginning again. Is it the melodic content? Is it the fact that that chord really feels like tonic when we arrive there? There's a lot of factors in play there. But again, hypermetric reset means no contrapuntal connection is required. Interesting. Because the hypermetric reset we saw in the Schumann was like you were actually starting at the beginning with the same notes and everything else. Here, we're in a different key. Different pitches in both parts. And yet, we still have that strong feeling in our brain, don't we? That this is a hypermetric downbeat. We're ready to start over.
It's also interesting how it seems like in measure 3, the right hand is transposed down to minor third.
It is.
But
the key is a 4th off.
Yeah, and
the
left hand is transposed down at perfect 5th.
Exactly.
So it's like,
right.
Well, I sometimes come across that on my own, doing that on my own, and I think like, geez, I wonder how that's going to sound.
Yeah,
it's like,
no, it's totally true. I mean, what's brilliant, well, you're good to point that out, because think about it, the melody pitch in measure 1 starts in the 3rd, right? Mm-hmm. And the melody pitch in measure 3 starts in the 5th of the key.
Right.
And so it feels like it's the same, and yet it's not the same. Right? This is what all the good species design is about, right? I want to point out that none of this would be in play if the left hand suddenly changed the figuration. None of this would be in play. It would not feel like a hypermetric downbeat. It would not feel like a repetition. And those fancy transpositions you were talking about, who cares? We wouldn't hear them. I mean, all I would have to do is change. Imagine just changing the directionality of the arpeggios. Let's try that, for example. So instead of playing, I'm playing the opposite, right? You would play. Interesting sound, but not after where we just came from. It would feel like the whole thing just got thrown on its head, and we wouldn't feel the hypermetric cohesion that we otherwise feel. Now, a lot of details in this piece to talk about. I just want to go through a few of them because literally I could do this all night. And we're already running out of time. But I want to point out when we get to this, I'll give you the choice. Those of you who are actually here. Focus on harmony here or focus on counterpoint? Because I can go either way. They're both fascinating. I know. I'll do a little of both. How about that? Okay. So when you look at the harmony right here, in the very beginning, we were just talking about Dorian positions. When the first law, you're in Do minor, and the first law you have is natural, you're going to feel Dorian. All right? So I'm going to play this as a chorale. By the way, isn't it interesting how close that is to fifths? Real close. That means that this chord, which should have been this, right? That means that the minor, the dominant becomes minor because we're in that Dorian feel where the seventh is low. And because of that, we have this interesting paradox. Do you hear this as 5, 1, with a beginning third? Or do you hear this as 2, 5, 1? In all honesty, either one sounds good. And this is the Faure double pivot, right? The famous double pivot chord. You have 2 chords in a row that both could be done either, that could exist in either key. And because of that, we're left like in this gray area. Right? I was saying this to one of my students earlier today. It's the gray area in music that you want to live in, right? When something is black or white, we get like, okay, well, that's it. But when it's just like, it could be either or, and you're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Like, I don't know. So, and then you want the composer or the performer to tell you what's next. Like, what's happening next? Like, what was it? You know, this is why we try to avoid tonic chords as much as we possibly can in writing tonal music today, because they're like a stop sign, right? It's like, well, we just got to stop. You know, look around. You should know where the cars are coming, and I guess we're going to restart, right? They're the end of something. Right?
Just like beats 2 and 3 you're talking about.
Yeah, beats 2 and 3 are bar 2. So they could be interpreted as 5-1, they could be third, although you're accepting the Mixolydian / Dorian 5 chord. Or they could be considered 2-5-1 in minor, which would be in F minor, right, subdominant. However, I will point out the caveat here, just in case you think I'm overlooking things, that if this were a true 2-5-1 in F minor, then the 2 should be diminished. All right, it should have a re flat because Fa minor has a re flat in it. Right, so it really should be this. Think about how weird this would be. And now we're really in minor. Now you look at that and you're like, oh man, that just like took a lot of the power out of it. Yeah, it did, because it made it very clearly 2-5-1 in the new key. But it's actually a Dorian 2 chord in F minor, because it has a D natural, which is the raised sixth of F minor, right? So really, it's either in C Dorian or it's in F Dorian. It's not in major or minor of either. And that's fascinating to me. Now, you get a little more, in the second phrase, a little more conclusion about what key you're in when you do this. But do you? Well, you just had a pretty solid F minor, although that D natural is still creeping you out, making you think it's Dorian. But then you had a 5 of the relative major. Right? However, if your ears are really, really, really sensitive, which is what we're all looking for, you would say, well, is that really a 5 of the relative major because we have a double leading tone? 2 soles in an E-flat dominant chord? That doesn't feel like it's correct. Shouldn't it have been? That sounds like a parallel octave waiting to happen, right? So again, I think if you're sensitive, you realize that that can't be a tonic. And in fact, Faure doesn't treat it like one, does it? As soon as he arrives, that wasn't tonic at all. That was a 4 chord in E flat. And so the dominant to A flat, which you thought was the secondary dominant to the relative major, was actually a 1 chord in disguise of the new home key. 1-6 with a misdoubled tonic triad. And thus we are in the double pivot area again, where we have 2 chords in a row which are both gray area. It could be one or the other, I have no idea. Until I get to what's after it, and I can retroactively go, oh yeah, that's what that was. This is what we call good harmony. This is what we call sexy harmony. and he does it again right here. So you feel like when we get to the E flat, okay, at least we're stably in E flat, right? And then you go, okay, that's okay. It's a 7 chord in the major. It's a 2 chord in the relative minor. We're okay, right? And he gives you the relative minor. And you're like, okay, well that was our home key, so that's it, right? We're good. No, this is beat 3. Okay, with the bar, and this is beat 1. Oh man. Well, is that the dominant? It can't be the dominant. It has a double leading tone again. So was the actual original tonic, the C minor, just a plagal set up for G major? Man, I don't know. Again, you go with the positions, the spacing, and double. When we get to the G major, does it feel stable? Oh yeah, it feels real stable. Feels great. Double third, third position, lowest note we've had in the piano so far. But could you really hear G major progression right here? I guess you could. I don't know. It's hard to say. Does it give you one? Of course not. And you're still floating between the two. And you never know which is tonic and which is dominant.
That's a great sound.
It's an amazing sound,
yeah.
isn't it? You know, like, I mean, I think Faure is the beneficiary of Schumann, Chopin, Bach, all playing with this, you know, others too, Beethoven to some degree, Mendelssohn to some degree, where pickety thirds make you feel both at the same time like, oh, that's great, it's a major chord, we're happy about that. That feels even better than the minor I was expecting. But it also makes it feel like a dominant. And that's the trick. Because in minor, when you take the tonic and you make it major, what happens? It becomes a 5/4. So it feels like a dominant chord. Right? As soon as I do, you're thinking, right? And so when I do, you can at any moment go, I feel like that's tonic. So the pickety both feels satisfactory and anticipatory as a dominant. That's a cool trick. And direct relation of the Chopin mazurka that does that famous trick. My favorite example of all time. That feels like tonic. That feels like tonic. That feels like tonic.
There's also, actually, I was listening to Beethoven Pastoral on the way over here. It's like there's always a passage in the third movement. It's a playable passage, but it's always intrigued me. It's like ba da 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 da.
Yeah, sure. That's an interesting. Hey, I'm gonna go back and look at that because I think that has some of the same characteristics. Yeah, you know. Well, one little thing about the counterpoint, I know I said I talked a little about it, only a tiny bit. Look at that sempre dolce measure 5. Notice there's something different happening here. There's a funny little magic accent in there, isn't there? Because for the first time, the accompaniment pattern reaches over top of the little dyad and makes this B-flat Re connection between the hands, right? Pushes the meter even more towards the 2/4 in violas. Because it makes that third beat feel like a downbeat. It makes it feel like 1, 2. But then 1. It's very tricky. This is like the most, unstable 3/4 you're going to find. It's very unstable. Yeah. Okay, let me push ahead real quick. When we get into the second passage of the piece, you see the measure that says Jouant de lutte. The B-flat dominant 7 chords. This is like second page on my score, 4 measures in. For the first time, he changes the downbeat rest. So the measure before you have. Now you're screwing with your brain. Because where's the downbeat now? Well, it has never been on beat 1 to start with this entire piece, and it never is until the very final measure. But the 8th rest pushes it even further. And it's not just the 8th rest. It's that when I play the left hand here, that's the one that feels like the strongest one. But it's the lowest. It's the octave. It's the root of the chord. And so it almost feels like the downbeat of this measure is the and of 3. Now, he knows this. Look what he does 2 bars later. Now, if you do it measure after measure, it really feels like the end of 3 is an downbeat. Now, Rebecca's sang this beautifully and perfectly. I've done this piece a lot of times with a lot of singers, and this is one of those spots where it's so easy to get for the singer to get off. Why? Because she really feels like, wait, the downbeat happened like an 8th note before I sang the downbeat. And like,
Did I sing that correctly?
No, you did it. You nailed it.
Okay, because it
feels weird though, right?
yes.
There you go. That's the whole point. Right?
Like every time I sing it, I'm like, I'm off. Like
Right.
something's
That is the goal of this type of thing. This is the species design that I'm talking about, right?
It's almost like I mean, you can't really listen to like the accompaniment when you're singing this.
Right. You just have to be like, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. Just keep going. And the pianist is like, please just keep going. Please just keep going. Because if the singer makes a mistake and then the pianist tries to adjust to it, you're lost. It's over. And so this is one of these songs, again, you look at it as an accompanist and you're like, well, don't really have to practice this, it's easy peasy. But like in performance, this could go bad in a hurry. In a hurry. And, because it's so delicate, and the singer has to be right up. And so, again, once the bass has been offset to such a degree in these 3 bars, when the return to tonic on the and of 1 feels super odd. And that means that the 2 bars that follow it are just out in space. Listen carefully and really think, where do you hear the downbeat? What a great passage. Right? Those last 2 measures are the key.
So good.
Doesn't it feel like time is like suspended there?
Yeah.
When you play those. What a winner. And of course, let's not forget, Faure is the all-time master of the augmented triad. Like, no one ever should write them except for him. He's that good at it. Like, I mean, so I know, yeah, we're all guilty. Did you see anyone? But not like he sucked at it or anything. But, I mean, the idea of right there, putting that augmented triad right at the end. What a killer sonority that is. A lesser composer would have taken the dissonance and done. Even though, see how dissonant that would be? Or done something even more awful and changed the species and done something like. Let me try to make this even worse. Hold on. Lose.
Terrible.
And if that were like a straight up dominant chord there, I mean, that D natural would just sound.
Oh, yeah.
It would sound like a mistake.
I agree 100%. And that's what's so wonderful about this. He hasn't given you, like I said, a black or white moment in this whole thing harmonically. Why would he do it right now and give you a 5-1 like that? Yeah, it would just be bad form. Yeah. And also, by the way, it would be parallel fifths with the measure before. Instead, it's. Why not? Now, to skip forward a little bit more, A flat major section of the piece, probably my favorite, kind of C section. A couple of things here. You might go, oh, well, he stopped doing the rest on the downbeat. Oh, did he? Of course he didn't, right? It's just that the agogic accent is still in the same place on the second 16th note, because you go down to it, and it is the root of the chord. So playing, it's the same thing as doing rest. It's the exact same. It's almost the exact same thing. And this is another moment that if singers are not singing, they're not counting, or what's going on.
That happened to me when we were rehearsing.
Right? And then always what happens?
I was
You're
like,
an
wait.
8, or a 16th note, or late, or early.
Yeah, it's hard. For some reason, it looks so easy.
Yep. And that's why counterpoint is so fascinating. Its relationship on metrics is so interesting. This looks like straight 16th notes, and it's anything but. Right? As any singer will tell you who sung this song. From a harmony point of view, can I just talk about how much I love a good retrograde cadence?
Sure.
So we're in A flat, right? Are we in A flat? Looks like it. Same thing. What do you get? A D natural, the Lydian pitch, right? Should kind of give away a little bit that we're going to do. So you're like, oh, well, we're in E flat, right? Sure, why not? But instead, of course, he does. And that's the moment. He writes Dolce on the piano. He knows that's the moment. Because why? The soprano goes, and you think, oh yeah, tonic. Yay. But then on that second eighth note, I mean, the first three pitches. What says tonic more than 1, 2, 3 in the key? Right? Well, that's over a 4 bar. Another one here. And then you think, okay, this one he's going to do it this time, right? And he's going to go sol, and you're going to get, right? But of course he's not going to do that. That would again be boring. And again, we don't know where we are. Love it. The final offset in this one happens, well, there's really two more. You see the sempre pianissimo near the end there? When you get the big secondary dominant? Whoa! Doesn't it feel like there's a 5/8 bar in there? Like it feels like that last bar is 5/8. This is why there's another moment that singers look at it like, looks easy on the page, it's tough in the ear. And, you know, I have to say, it's also kind of funny because the text right there, les grands jets d'eau, les, meaning, of course, the, right, is not a word you usually put on the downbeat. Right? It's usually a pickup. Yeah. Les grands jets d'eau svelte parmi les mâles. That's how you normally say it, right? The accent was. Right. But he has les grands jets d'eau svelte par les mis. It's like all the wrong syllables are on the downbeats. Why? Because they aren't the downbeats. The downbeats are the second eighth note. Mm-hmm. Right? Because the bass tells you that. So this feels like a pickup. There's your downbeat. So this feels like 1, 2, 3. Sneaky. Right? And that's why you look at it and it looks like bad text setting. It looks like, you know, student brought it in, you'd be like, you put all the articles on the downbeats. Like, you put the nouns on the downbeats, moron. Right? Right? But actually it's right, because they're not the downbeats. And that final thing, very end. He's had the 16th note offset the entire piece. He's occasionally giving you the 8th note offset just because, you know, that's even weirder. What does he do in the coda? Quarter note. So you're really waiting for it. And I would argue that the penultimate bar and the final bar, well, really just the penultimate bar, are the only bars in the piece that are in 3/4. The only ones. Every other one has some offset to make you feel like it's not. That one there, 1, 2, 3. That's a 3/4. Could be anything else.
Earning the downbeat.
Earning the downbeat. Thank you for reminding me. It's my favorite slogan of the year this year. Earn your downbeats. Right? Don't just put them in there. They're already there. Earn them via your counterpoint and via your species design. Good. That was a blitzkrieg of information, as always.
Should I sing it again?
You want to sing it one more time?
I don't know. Would that be good for people?
Everybody want to hear it one more time?
I'd love to.
Why the hell not?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
Now I'm going to be really paranoid about all this.
Yeah, now, you know. The trick is, of course, not to overplay it or overthink it. Now that we've learned all this.
Oh, no.
You ready? Excellent. Well, thank you all. Thank you all. Thanks to all the people watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Take care. My pleasure.
More to stick my teeth into.